Hello, and welcome back to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about their recently released books. Hello, and welcome back to the Author Roundup, a special segment of the Book Connection Show where we meet up and coming indie authors and talk to them about their recently released books. Hi, this is Ray. In this episode, I will be talking to the author of the book entitled William's Capture and a story about the power of change agents. She is a retired teacher who taught English in both special education setting and the public school. She's using her retired time to pursue writing, a dream she has always had. Our special guest for today's episode, Ms. Zenobia Canali. Hi, Zenobia. Welcome to the Author Roundup. Finally.
Thank you, Ray. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you, and congratulations for publishing your book with Balboa Press. So Zenobia, this is just going to be a short conversation, but I want to go ahead and make sure that we get all the things that we need to know about you. Before we talk about your book, can you please give us like an overview of your career? What made me interested is that you were a retired English teacher. You taught English, that is, and both in special education setting and public school setting. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes. Well, I've always loved to write since childhood, and I became an English teacher. And then I worked, my first professional job was in Cambridge, Massachusetts, worked in an alternative junior high school setting, and I taught English there. These were the students who were no longer able to be serviced in the public school setting. So it was a very unique program. And I really learned an awful lot about, I was trained, I had a great training experience working with students who had specific behavioral problems, mostly some with learning disabilities as well. And then we moved from Massachusetts back to my hometown, Rhode Island, and I began working once again in a special ed environment, and I taught English there. And then I worked in the mainstream population, teaching English in the public school setting. So very different environments with unique challenges.
How many years did you spend in teaching English? Did you do this all together, or you spend a couple of years doing or teaching English in special education and then moving on to public school setting?
Well, my entire career was around 30-something years. So the first job was about 8 years in the alternative school. And then actually, when I moved into the public school setting, I did have a year in a junior high school. It was the Newport Public Schools, where I actually worked with students who needed additional help with and those kinds of skills. And then the remainder of my career was in the high school at Rogers High School. With the last 10 years, I served as the English department chair. So I still taught, and I taught various different levels. You know, I worked with advanced placement students, and I also worked with the general population.
So why writing? Is this earlier? I mentioned that this has always been your dream. So is writing something that you were doing while you're also teaching, or is this something that you're like, I'm going to do you a little later in life, but you're going to have a grand stage where I can really write?
Yeah. No, I always, when I graduated from high school, and I was going, when I was planning to go to college, and my father spoke in a gruff voice and said, "What are you going to do?" And I said, and my father said, "Oh, I ain't going to make a living." And so, that I ended up becoming an English major, and then I
Mm.
went to my master's and got my master's in special education and in education, pardon me, with a concentration in special education. And so, in terms of writing, I was very, it brought me comfort. And I kept diaries, I kept a journal, I wrote stories, I
Mhm.
wrote when I was in school. I used to, had lots of conversations with the students and, told them I'm going to write a book. And they were
Wow.
like, am I going to be in it? Am I going to be in it? I said, we'll see. And so it's, it's, it's something I've always wanted to do. And now I'm doing it as much as I can, given that I'm part of a huge family and there's all sorts of things going on in the family.
Well,
So,
we're here. You're here right now. You're living that dream. And speaking of writing, Zenobia, you've written a book. The title of our guest's book, ladies and gentlemen, is William's Capture. So, Zenobia, can you please indulge us and then talk about this book that you have written?
so my inspiration was one of my first students that I had. And his story, I was compelled to write the story. He
Hmm.
entered America from Senegal, and I really I don't know all of the facts of how he got here. The
Hmm.
social worker with whom he worked is no longer available. And I did not go looking for this student. Okay. So what I did is it is a story based on a real person. And I
Hmm.
visualized how I would hope his life had turned out. And so, like I said, I haven't been in touch with him since, the early 80s when he graduated and I moved to Rhode Island. And I didn't want to I didn't want to have to go, I didn't want to search and become, an investigator looking for this young man. I really wanted to use my imagination to decide what I wanted to happen with his life, if that
Right.
makes sense. And also, in light of what's happening not politically, but in the world in terms of the migrants coming into America, I thought, this is not new. This was in the 70s. We had all sorts of people wanting to come to America to
Hmm.
themselves and to have a better life. And I thought, what about, you know, he came to my mind because his life was, I mean, how do you get here from Senegal into Boston? How does that happen? And he had a very disturbing past. But
Hmm.
I don't know all of the details, and neither does, I contacted one of the directors of the school that I worked at, which was called Far Academy. And we talked a little bit about this young man. And anyway, so that was my inspiration. And then
Hmm.
I wanted to do fiction. I want to imagine and pretend and have fun with characters. And that's what I did. And so,
It sounds like a good story. We're not going to talk much about the story of your book, but there's a portion of it that I'm very curious about. What exactly is a change agent in reference to William's capture and a story of the power of change agents?
well, I look at a change agent a little bit like an angel, but not, but, but a little bit different in
Mm.
that we all have change agents around us.
Mm.
And we either accept the message or we don't. The messages could be positive, they can also be negative.
Mm.
And our is what does a person do? What
Mm.
does an individual do when they're confronted with an opportunity, an experience, an adventure? how do you respond? And in terms of William, in my perception of what I wanted to do with him, he had many change agents that entered into his world that
Right.
brought him to different parts of his life.
When you say change agent, could it be a particular situation in your life, or could it be a person? Am I correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, we're talking about the protagonist of your book and then how these change agents help him all throughout the story.
Yes.
That's interesting.
You don't necessarily, no, you don't say, oh my God, this is a change agent. You
Mm,
know who's going to be in each of our universes. We don't know who or what we will confront.
mm.
And the power is intrinsically, what do you do and where does it take you? I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
Like a
Well,
womb.
having this kind of book, Zenobia, now I'm wondering how many years did it take you to finish this? Like you have to do research, right? You mentioned that earlier, try to do a little bit of an investigation. And so you decided to fictionalize the story as well. We added in characters perhaps and scenes. And so there's this character development journey for the protagonist of the book, for the subject of the book. But how long did it take you to finish the story?
Sitting down and writing time probably took a year.
A
Okay,
year.
the writing time, but the
Mhm.
work time, and I actually wrote another book called You Are Not for Everyone. That was a memoir. I wrote it for another person, Jackie Henderson. And
Mhm.
so in the time frame in which I've been retired, I wrote that book. We had two weddings, two of my sons were married. My husband had a medical problem and I had a medical problem.
Oh.
So things were put on hold and delayed. But
Mhm.
there were, for me, my process is to record snippets. What I mean is to write little snippets of things that enter into my mind. So William's story was always there. It had
Mhm.
to, and it finally came out. So I don't know, I think that answer, I mean, for me, I mean, I've begun doing snippets for another book as well. So I anticipate when I sit down again, in my own mind, I give myself like a year's time to finish the actual writing portion. And I had my youngest son, I had him help me a little bit with research because he had come home, whatever, he was home and he had some time. And I asked him, could he do this for me? So,
So it was a journey for you, an entire year of writing. A lot of our viewers and listeners would know two things in every author's journey in writing their book. We'll start with the fun part. What was the fun part in writing this book?
the fun part is you get to imagine and create characters how you want them.
Yeah.
Uh, I must say, I did pull upon people I knew and took some of their characteristics, and then
Mhm.
it was like I was creating, like I was creating a person, and because I didn't take all the characteristics. So that's the fun part. The fun part is being able to take your imagination and put it in writing and create a story. I mean,
Yeah.
who doesn't to tell a story? You know, there are so many stories to tell. So
Right.
that's the fun part.
Well, I'm quite amazed at the length of time it took you to complete your work because obviously when you're writing you have a lot of things in mind that you would want to go ahead and include, exclude, rewrite, and stuff like that. So it goes to show that you writing really is your passion. Let's let's look at the challenging part in completing this book. What made
The
it challenging?
largest, the the biggest challenge for me was accepting my fears of putting myself out there in the world
Right.
and allowing those around me, especially close friends and family, to see a part of me that they may not know. Because a part of every author, a part of themselves is in everything that they write. And so I was nervous about that. I was nervous about how would it be received. And so that part was difficult. And you're exposing you're
Yeah.
exposing skills. And is it good enough? Who says I can do this? Why do I think I can do this? And then I really decided I have to believe in me. I have to believe that what I have to say is important and worthy of being told. And once I did that, then I didn't care what I stopped thinking about other people. And then in terms of the narrative, I mean, you really have to, I think about how realistic, how do I want it to be composed? Did I want a linear timeline? What was the point of not having a linear? All of those problems that you have to, how
Right.
do I want it to the chapters to be set up? What did I want to transpire? Dialogue, all of that stuff. When I say a year, I'm talking about sitting down, writing time, going back, rewriting. I mean, when you look at the whole picture, it was much more than that because, I hadn't written a book until I worked with Jackie. And then that was the first book that I did, which was a great exercise because I really had to put my stuff on hold to concentrate on that book. I can't, for me, it's hard for me to do two things at the same time, even though I did keep my snippets going. So,
Right. I totally agree. And of the authors I've spoken to, I've talked with, well, even the authors that we know of today, the ones that are really successful, they didn't have that grand vision, like they're going to become popular, that their book's going to make it big out there. But just like you, they followed what they wanted to do, what they've always been wanting to do, and they were given a break, and now they're there. And so that's, I believe, every author's journey. You would never really know until you give it a try, right? And so congratulations for that. You've already shared this with your family, and I believe that there are a lot of people already that has bought your book. So let's talk about feedback. What's the nicest feedback did you receive?
well, it's mostly from people that have read the book. They have told me they wanted to keep reading. They wanted to know what was going to happen. So that encouraged me. That made me feel, oh wow, they're really understanding it. And there's sort of a backstory that has to do with the institution of education. And not quite a backstory, but there are some nuances in there. And so for people who are immersed in education, caught some of that part of the book and had some interesting things to say as well. At this point, it's mostly friends and family who have read the book. I do have a very close friend who's very honest and upfront and will not hold back. And her opinion really mattered to me. And she enjoyed it and wanted to keep reading it and did not find it a boring story or that. So far, I am still waiting. I am very curious about the Kirkus review because I have asked for that, but that. So I'm still waiting to hear. I kind of wish that could have been done before the publication, but the way they work, it's done after. So
The book has to be complete first. And
yes,
it's like, I'm
yes.
excited for you. Like, it's Kirkus that we're talking about, hoping that you'll get a positive feedback from them.
But I've met my goal. My goal was to write a book, have it published. I mean, I just saw my book on a bookshelf in a bookstore. And that was that's my goal. I mean, I
That,
knew I was going to be, a famous author right off the bat. And so this I met my goal. And I had, like I said, I have another story brewing in my head. And I think I have a novel, perhaps two. And then, I mean, I'm getting up there in my age, anyways.
I'm very much excited for you, Zenobia. Can you please share some advice? We have lots of authors right now who are listening in on our podcast station and are watching our YouTube channel. And how can you encourage them?
Well, I had one professor who told us all everybody has a book in them. That's
Mhm.
number two. His advice was finish it, finish it. So believe that you can write a book. It's period. I'm writing a book. I mean, when you say it out loud and you tell people, of course, they're going to start telling you how to do it. And oh, well, I have a story, and I'd love you to write it for me or whatever. No, I think you sit down, whatever, and you do it. You do it. There's nothing more I can really say. I mean, there are different processes. People write differently, have different routines in how they write, and that is yours to decide. Nobody else can decide that for you. If you want to write a book, do it the way you want to do it, how you want to do it, and ask for guidance or advice when it suits you to go in that direction.
Right.
I don't know if that's
That's very encouraging. Thank you so much, Zenobia. What are your professional and personal plans this year for yourself and for your book?
well, I am retired and
Yeah.
I want a 9 to 5 job. I don't want to work. I've become a grandmother. I have this is not professional, but I have my first grandchild, and she a granddaughter. I
Mhm.
have had 3 sons. And so it's nice to have a granddaughter, and that part of my life means a lot to me. My family means a lot to me. I grew up in a large Greek family, and
Mhm.
so that's important to me. As far as professional endeavors, I feel like I'm no longer in the workforce. So I'm doing things I want to do, and I want to write. I want to continue writing.
Mhm.
And my aspirations with that is like I said, there are stories, roaming around in my brain that I want to get out, and I want to be able to tell them. I think they're worthy to be heard.
Right.
So beyond that, of course, you know, beyond that, traveling, of course, and that's it. I love working outdoors. I mean, I'm finished with I don't, I'm not interested in going back into the school system and tutoring. I wouldn't mind helping children with reading. I love doing that. And
Right,
I
right.
I always loved working with students around writing. I used to have a great time with them.
But how about for your book?
For Williams Capture,
Yes.
I'm hoping I would love to do discussion groups. And I'm very interested in bringing it into around educators to
Mhm.
talk about some of the educational issues that are brought up. William attended an alternative school. And I think the American public school system is in dire need of help. And some of the lessons that I learned working in an alternative environment, I try to bring into the school, into in my own little world. And most times I was really, there were groups of teachers who understood, and then there were other groups who were, touchy-feely. Zenobia's a touchy-feely, whatever, teacher. And I did start a program with two of my colleagues called the Newport Project, where we wanted students to explore what their interests were and to do it around, to try and find resources on this very historical, we have lots of history here in Newport and Aquidneck Island, and through their interests, attempt to help them with the other disciplines. With English, we had a science teacher who was part of the group. And I think we have to look at integrating the disciplines as opposed to separating them out. And the other thing is, here we are in a situation with young adults, and there's not much kindness. I mean, I just think as a world, we need to be kind to one another. I don't know. I feel I'm philosophizing right now, but so I'd like to share, in educational environments. Perhaps I am in touch. I am in touch with a University of Rhode Island, not formally, but speaking with students who would like to become teachers, and just to explore different ways of working with young adults. That's the broad picture in terms of we all enter schools with different skills, different needs, and I don't think we are always as adults that we take that into account. But that was a piece of myself that needed to come out, and some of that came out through the experience with William.
That is very nice. I know that you have a copy of your book with you, right? You might want to go ahead and show us a copy of your book. That book, ladies and gentlemen, just came out. That was April 18 of 2024, and that is William's Capture. Now, should I want to go ahead and buy that book, where can I pick it up?
You can pick it up through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all online, and it is available here on in one bookstore, independent bookstore, and I'm planning to get it in Island Books in Middletown, Rhode Island, through Balboa Press. So it's available through those sources.
That is a beautiful book you have. This is very interesting. But before we go, I just want to go ahead and ask for a final message from you.
With regard to my book,
yes,
I really want to convey, I'm really looking for us to develop our humanity, to open ourselves up to acceptance, to understanding the trials, that the difficulties that specifically young adults, it is the most tumultuous time in their lives. And we bring them all together into public schools as if everybody's going to learn in the same way and be interested in the same subjects. And it's very much a closed institutional, I'm in charge. You must do what I say. Working together to help young adults develop into thinking adults who have the power to make their decisions, to fail and to pick themselves up, and to acknowledge that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have fears, and to work through those and make our institutions humane. I guess that would be one message. And the other message in terms of writing, if writing is something you enjoy it and do it and believe in yourself that what you have to say is important to you. It's important to others. That's what I believe and hope.
Thank you so much for sharing yourself with us today, Zenobia. It was a pleasure talking to you. I hope you enjoy your time here in the Book Connection Show.
Yes, thank you so much for asking me the questions and having me reflect too. I think that is part of, you never want to stop. I turned 70 this year, and I never want to stop being learning and open and looking around and enjoying life, and and grasping the problems that are. I mean, we had a tough morning getting this going, and I said, relax, take a deep breath. It's going to work out. I mean, you heard initially, you could hear my anxiety and my fears, and those are things that we have to accept and find ways to go beyond that. And writing has been that. Writing has been an outlet for me in many, many different ways.
And I'm hoping, Zenobia, that by your second book, we're still going to have a second conversation about it, and I'm sure it's going to be equally as fun as what we're having right now. Yes. So that's my wish and my hope for you. Thank you so much for joining me today. Now, I also would like to thank our viewers and listeners who stayed all throughout this conversation. Now, before you go, show some love by subscribing to our channel and stay tuned for our next interview on the Book Connection Show, where we meet extraordinary indie voices with incredible stories. Again, this is Ray Walters. Join me next time here on the Book Connection Show.